Looking at this handout, you should have hopefully read the information that was on the reading assignment for limited government. So this whole entire unit, when we're looking at popular sovereignty and we're looking at separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, judicial review, all of these really work together to limit the powers of our government. Going back, we have to remember we came from an close to an absolute monarch under King George III, where we had an all-powerful king. Then we created the government under the Articles of Confederation that basically created the weakest government that they could possibly make, with Shays' Rebellion being that moment when they realized that we need a more powerful government, and if we don't, we're going to lose control and England's going to come back in and take over. So then they wanted to create the Constitution and this new government that was somewhere, maybe not in between, but giving our government a little more power, but still making sure that it is very, very limited. So once again, we create a constitution whose purpose and function is to limit the powers of the government. Rule of law from your reading, the fact that when we create laws, the president is still subject to those laws. Congress is subject to the laws. The judicial branch is subject to the laws, and there's a whole entire section just on rule of law and due process, and so that will become hopefully a little clearer to you. Separation of powers, we've been talking about that since the very beginning, the three branches of government. Consent of the governed, that is that idea of popular sovereignty coming from John Locke, and then put into the Declaration of Independence. So hopefully you're seeing all of the things that we've been talking about so far coming together in these principles that the Founding Fathers used when they are creating the Constitution. The rights of the minority. We want to make sure that we don't have mob rule, the tyranny of the mob, and that we have a government that is put in place that, yes, we have to have a way to make decisions where we're going to use majority rule, but we always keep in mind protecting the rights of the minority, these smaller, more unpopular groups, regardless of what they believe or how they believe, we have to treat everyone fairly. And so then you had the reading assignment about the power in Peru and the leader who took over there and systematically took away some of the people's rights and gave himself more and more power. And so on this handout here, I don't care whether you do the sequence. That's not something that's really important. But down here at the bottom, I want you to spend some time thinking about when there is one leader who has total control, there are some benefits from that. Obviously some drawbacks. But, if you think about what some of the benefits are, in the first one there, easier to make changes. We saw under the Articles of Confederation it was impossible because you had to have all of them to agree. The Constitution we create today makes it a little easier, but still it takes a lot to change our Constitution. It's only been done 27 times. So if you only have one leader, it's very easy to make changes. They decide and they make the changes. Number two there's less disagreement and tension in government. If you have one person making and calling all the shots, of course, we're not asking anyone's opinion. You don't have the issues that we have in our government today where you have the Republicans versus the Democrats. And then even within their own parties, some Democrats don't always agree with all the Democrats. And the Republicans don't agree with the Republicans. So you have one person in charge, you have less disagreement, you have less tensions. This is the way it's going to be. Citizens know what to expect and there's less changes. When Hitler was in power, you knew exactly what to expect. If you disagreed with him, he was going to kill you. Today, part of our problem with making decisions, and this we'll talk later on about in economics, when you have multiple people in power, things can change. Laws change, rules change. When we have a new president come in, they can undo some of the things that the old president did and put in place new policies that they are in favor of. And then finally, in the fourth one, easier to try new ideas that might not otherwise get support. And there's all kinds of things that we could talk about there. But it's just when you have one person in power, easier to make changes. You don't have any disagreements. The people pretty much know who you are and what you're going to do. And if you want to try a new idea, you don't have to go through the layers and layers, and you don't have to have the House look at it, and then the Senate, and then the President, and then the courts, and then institute it amongst the states, or however that's going to be. It's very, very easy to do that. Obviously, some drawbacks when you have one person in control. There's no way to control that leader. I hate to continually point to Hitler. I mean, we can look at Kim Jong-un today, or even Vladimir Putin, who's trying to take Russia back to the old former communist ways. So there's no way to control these particular leaders. It's easier for the leader to abuse power and mistreat people. We're seeing that in all of these countries where you have one leader who has total power. Their people are being abused, and that's the way they maintain power. It's hard to change bad ideas that aren't working. It doesn't matter that people disagree with these leaders. People are afraid to challenge them, and so even if they're doing things that everyone in the country disagrees with, no one's going to step up and say anything, because once again, there's fear there, and that's how they maintain control. People don't have a say in their government, and obviously, going back to the fighting of the Revolutionary War, the people were angry. They would have paid their taxes had they had a say in Parliament. But you don't give us a say. We do not feel like that we should have to listen and follow the rules that you make when we don't have a say in them. So ultimately, the question that I'm going to ask, or what I want you to know, is when we're looking at governments with limited control and governments with unlimited powers, which one is more efficient? And obviously, a dictatorship is going to be more efficient. We don't have the layers of government. We don't have to consult anyone. But this is something that the Founding Fathers were aware of, and they wanted to set a system in place where it was difficult to get things passed. So people today get very frustrated that government doesn't move very fast. And so if you were to ask a Founding Father or consult one of the Founding Fathers and talk to them about your frustrations about what's going on today, they would probably tell you that's exactly how they intended it to be. It was supposed to be slow. It was not supposed to be where if something happens, and let's use a school shooting for example, regardless of your position on guns, that's not what I'm talking about right here, but people are very, that's a very sensitive issue. And so you have some people who think instantly we should take away the guns. And so if we had a situation where government worked very quickly, or you had one person in power, if that person happened to be anti-gun, right then and there, the guns would be gone. Right or wrong, your feelings on that is not the point. But the point is, we have a government that can sit back and think about things, and there's a long drawn-out process to get almost everything done. So the Founding Fathers were to actually say that a less efficient, one that worked slower, took its time, made sure that all voices were heard, that everyone was consulted, and that we end up with some sort of compromise where nobody's actually happy. So limited government was the ideal, or what the Founding Fathers were actually working for. They wanted to make it easier, they wanted to give more power than what were under the Articles of Confederation, but still maintaining that we have a constitution put in place whose sole purpose is to outline what our government can and cannot do, and beyond that, they shouldn't have the powers.